old iron door slammed shut behind me with a clang. That sound, like a sledgehammer, completely shattered all my fantasies about my boyfriend Ethan. Once upon a time his heart held a faint promise to take me to Europe, to see the rolling hills of Tuscany, and walk the moonlit streets of Paris. However, today, I was ruthlessly pushed by him into this airtight basement. In the air, the smell of rust intertwined with the scent of despair. He took my $500,000 and sold me. The man they called the buyer had eyes as sharp as a hawk. He walked towards me step by step, the immense pressure almost suffocating me. Ethan, with trembling hands, pushed a heavy pelican case in front of the man called Mr. Russo. His voice was filled with unrestrained greed. "Mr. Russo, $500,000, all cash," he finished, and eagerly took a step back, as if the case were a hot potato. His eyes darted around, never daring to look at me. And I, like a piece of merchandise with a clear price tag, stood in the basement of this strange country, feeling cold all over, my heart colder than the concrete floor. 3 days ago, Ethan held me tightly, gently painting the blueprint of our future. "Babe, I landed a massive deal at the firm. The partners are giving me a bonus, a trip for 2 anywhere in Europe. I want to take you to see the most beautiful sunset in the world," he said affectionately. I was immersed in the sweet lies he wove, and without hesitation, I quit my job. Full of anticipation, I followed him, and boarded the flight to Lisbon. After the plane landed, he said with a sincere face, "I need to handle the travel documents and hotel confirmations." Then he took my passport and ID. I had no suspicion at the time until he brought me to this remote villa outside the city, until the heavy iron door closed behind me, until the fierce-looking Mr. Russo appeared. Only then did I wake up as if from a dream. This so-called romantic journey, its destination, was actually hell. I looked at Ethan. That face that I was once so infatuated with now only felt strange and ugly. My voice was dry and hoarse. I used all my strength to ask Ethan why. He finally looked up at me. His eyes held not a trace of guilt, only impatient annoyance. "Ava, don't blame me. Blame yourself for being broke and easy to fool. I need a lot of money. You can't give it to me, but someone can." His words were like a poisoned knife, stabbed fiercely into my heart. It turned out that our 3 years together, in his eyes, was just a transaction that could be cashed in at any time. Ethan nodded and bowed, his face full of a fawning smile. He said to Mr. Russo, "Mr. Russo, you've inspected the asset, I've received the payment, so I'll be on my way." Mr. Russo ignored him. Those eyes that seemed to freeze one's soul were locked on me. He was tall, dressed in a well-tailored black suit. His demeanor was calm, yet dangerous. He slowly circled me, as if examining the quality of an item. That gaze made me feel a wave of humiliating trembling. My hands were bound with zip ties behind my back, and my mouth was sealed with duct tape. I could only glare at Ethan, with eyes full of hatred. This man I had loved for 3 years, and even started planning a future with, had personally pushed me into the abyss. Mr. Russo walked up to me, reached out a hand wearing a leather glove, and roughly lifted my chin. I was forced to meet his gaze, and in his deep eyes I saw indifference and coldness. It was the look of someone who regarded life as insignificant. I closed my eyes in despair, tears streamed down my face. Just then I felt the hand holding my chin suddenly stiffen. I opened my eyes in confusion, and found him staring at my neck. To be precise, at the silver pendant hanging from my neck. It was a piece of intricate silverwork, forged into the shape of a rising phoenix. I had worn it since I could remember. My mother once told me, "This was your grandmother's. No matter what, you must not take it off." Over the years, it had become a part of my body. At this moment, this Mr. Russo, he terrified me. His gaze changed from its initial sharpness to shock, then to disbelief, and finally a trace of awe and panic welled up. He released my chin. His hand trembled slightly, wanting to touch the pendant, but stopped in midair, as if it were a sacred and inviolable relic. This is yours." His voice was no longer cold, filled with uncertainty and a slight tremor. I couldn't answer, I could only respond with my eyes. He seemed to realize this, and immediately turned around, commanding the subordinate behind him in a tone that brooked no argument, "Get that tape off her mouth." The subordinate dared not delay, and immediately stepped forward and roughly tore the tape from my mouth. The sharp pain made me gasp, but I couldn't be bothered with that. All my attention was on the man before me. This man's unusual behavior intrigued me. I'm asking you, where did you get this pendant? He asked again, his tone urgent, his eyes locked on the phoenix pendant. I watched him warily, my brows furrowed slightly, my heart full of doubt, not understanding why things had suddenly changed. My mother gave it to me, I answered truthfully, a trace of caution in my eyes. Hearing the word mother, his body suddenly jolted and his breathing became rapid, his eyes instantly filled with panic. Your mother, is her name Eleanor Vance? He asked word by word, his voice distorted by nervousness, his eyes full of anticipation and fear. Eleanor Vance, that was my mother's name, a strong classic name. I was stunned, my eyes full of confusion, not understanding how he knew my mother's name, and even less understanding why this name caused him to react so violently. It is. How do you know? My voice was wary and puzzled. Receiving a positive answer, Mr. Russo's body suddenly lost its strength. He staggered back 2 steps, his face turned pale, and a fine cold sweat broke out on his forehead. The way he looked at me completely changed. The previous indifference and scrutiny disappeared, replaced by terror, regret, and unease. The subordinates in black behind him looked at each other, clearly bewildered by their boss's abnormal behavior. Ethan on the side was dumbfounded, thinking Mr. Russo had taken a fancy to the pendant. He hurried forward with a fawning smile. Mr. Russo, if you like the necklace, consider it a gift from me. You can do whatever you want with this woman. As soon as he finished speaking, Mr. Russo turned his head abruptly, his eyes bloodshot with anger. He rushed forward in 1 step, and backhanded Ethan hard across the face. Crack. The sharp sound echoed in the basement. Ethan was sent spinning and fell to the ground. Half of his face quickly swelled up, blood seeping from the corner of his mouth. He clutched his face in a daze, looking at Mr. Russo in disbelief. Mr. Russo. What was that for? Shut your damn mouth, Mr. Russo pointed at his nose, his voice hoarse with anger. Do you have any idea who you sold? Did you know you almost got me killed? He no longer looked at Ethan, as if another glance would be disgusting. He turned and strode towards me, carefully cutting the zip ties on my wrists, his movements carrying a trace of reverence. Once my hands were free, he immediately took a step back, bowed deeply, and said in a tone of awe, Miss Vance, my name is Marcus Russo. I was blind and failed to recognize you. My failure is unforgivable. Please tell me how to make this right. Miss Vance, subordinate, I was completely confused. The man who wanted to buy me a second ago was now bowing before me, calling me Miss Vance. You know my mom. This was the only explanation I could think of. Russo maintained his deep bow, not daring to lift his head. More than just know her. Ma'am is my everything. Without her there would be no Marcus Russo today. Ma'am, he called my mother, ma'am. In my memory, my mother was an ordinary and strict single mother. She ran a small import-export business and raised me on her own. She was always busy and strict with me. Our relationship was distant. How could she be the ma'am in the mouth of a man like this? All of this was beyond my comprehension. I don't understand. My mother, she. Miss Vance. This is not the place to talk. Russo straightened up and made a respectful gesture of invitation. You've been through an ordeal. I will immediately arrange for you to rest in a secure location. As for this worthless piece of trash, his gaze shifted to the still dazed Ethan, his eyes once again turning cold and ruthless. Mr. Russo, no, sir, I was wrong. I really didn't know he. Ethan, realizing he had messed with the wrong person, scrambled to his knees at Russo's feet, clinging to his leg and begging, I didn't know her mother was Eleanor Vance Ava. Honey. Please say something. Our 3 years together, you can't just watch me die. I looked at him coldly, my heart filled with disgust and ridicule. Do you know my mom? I asked again. Russo continued to bow his head slightly. Ma'am has shown me immense kindness. I owe my very life to her. The moment he thought of selling me for money, the seeds of hatred had taken root between us. Russo respectfully turned to me, his eyes lowered, his hands clasped in front of him, and asked softly, Miss Vance, how should we dispose of this individual? At that moment, a sense of power I had never felt before landed heavily in my hands. I looked at Ethan. He was a mess of tears and snot, his eyes filled with terror. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my trembling voice. I don't want to see him again. Russo understood and nodded slightly, giving a look to the subordinates behind him. 2 subordinates quickly stepped forward and dragged Ethan up like a sack of garbage. Ethan struggled and cursed. "No, Ava, you venomous bitch, I was blind to have fallen for you. You'll get what's coming to you." I ignored him, only feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over me. My legs felt weak. Russo escorted me out of that suffocating basement. The sunlight outside was blinding. I raised my hand to block it. He quickly walked to a luxurious black sedan, opened the car door, and bowed slightly. "Miss Vance, please." I got into the car, and the car drove away from the villa smoothly. I hesitated for a long time and finally spoke up. "Mr. Russo, can you tell me what's going on? Who is my mother, really?" Russo looked at me through the rearview mirror, his eyes filled with reverence. "Miss Vance, it's not my place to discuss ma'am's affairs. What you've seen is just the tip of the iceberg. The business empire ma'am has built is beyond your imagination. This phoenix pendant is the only sigil of ma'am's direct heir. Seeing the pendant is like seeing ma'am in person. A business empire." My mind was in a whirl. The mother who reminded me to eat my vegetables and study for my SATs was the creator of a vast business empire. How was that possible? The car stopped in front of a heavily guarded estate. This was a world away from the apartment I used to live in. Soaring walls, a closed wrought iron gate, and a row of security personnel in black suits standing at the entrance. Their expressions were stern, their eyes warily scanning the surroundings. When they saw Russo's car, the iron gate slowly opened, and we drove in smoothly. The estate was the epitome of luxury. A huge fountain sprayed water in the circular driveway, the lawns were perfectly manicured, and there was a white castle-like mansion. Russo led me to an elegant guest suite. The room was large, and through the floor-to-ceiling windows I could overlook the grounds. He said respectfully, "Miss Vance, please rest first. A change of clothes has been prepared. I have already informed ma'am of your safety. She will be here as soon as possible." I nodded, my thoughts still in chaos. After he left, I walked to the full-length mirror, looking at the pale-faced, terrified reflection of myself. I subconsciously touched the phoenix pendant on my neck. It felt a little warm. What secret was hidden within it? What kind of person was my mother, Eleanor Vance? I took a hot shower and changed into a silk nightgown. My mood calmed down a bit. I lay in bed. The past 22 years of my life flashed through my mind like a movie. In my memory, my mother was a strong woman. She had divorced my father early on and raised me on her own. She opened an import-export company. The business was neither big nor small, enough to provide us with a comfortable life. She was always busy, often on business trips for weeks at a time. She was strict with my upbringing, with clear requirements for my studies and life. She rarely smiled at me, nor did she offer easy praise. I used to think she didn't love me, so when Ethan appeared, his care and sweet words easily captured my heart. I thought I had found a support, but I didn't expect it to be a trap. Thinking back now, there were always some unexplainable details in my life. For example, our family wasn't wealthy, but I always attended top private schools, and whenever I encountered trouble, it would always be mysteriously resolved the next day. Also, although my mother was strict, she gave me a lot of freedom, never interfering with my friendships and relationships, as if she was certain I wouldn't get hurt. Could it be that all of this was under her control? Then my being deceived and sold abroad by Ethan, did she know about that too? This thought sent a chill down my spine. Just as my mind was racing, there was a knock on the door. A maid came in and said respectfully, "Miss Vance, ma'am has arrived. Mr. Russo asks you to come to the study. He says there are some follow-up matters regarding Ethan that he needs to report to you." The name Ethan was like a sharp needle, stabbing my nerves again. I slowly put on a coat and followed the maid to the study. Russo stood in front of a huge mahogany desk. When he saw me come in, he immediately strode forward to greet me. "Miss Vance." He handed over a tablet. "This is the preliminary investigation result on Ethan Wright." I took the tablet, and Ethan's detailed information was displayed on the screen, far more detailed than what I knew. It turned out he was not a top university graduate. His degree from Columbia was forged. He was also not a project manager at a hedge fund, but a complete fraud. His approaching me was a carefully planned scam from the very beginning. Behind him, there was a syndicate specializing in pig butchering romance scams. And his so-called dying ex-girlfriend was not seriously ill at all. He had incurred a huge gambling debt, and she was being hailed by his creditors. The $500,000 I was sold for was to pay them back. At the end of the file was a video. The background of the video looked like that cold basement. Ethan was tied to a chair, his face full of terror. He begged and pleaded and revealed everything. It turned out it was his creditor's idea to have him find a girl from a simple family and trick her into being sold abroad, and I became the perfect target. I watched his ugly face in the video, and my stomach churned. I turned off the video and handed the tablet back to Russo. "Where is he now?" I asked coldly. A cold glint flashed in Russo's eyes. He said calmly, "As you instructed, you don't want to see him again. I have had my men take care of it. I guarantee he will disappear from this world completely. No one will know he ever existed." He spoke casually, but it sent a shiver down my spine. Is this my mother's world? A single sentence can decide a person's life or death. Although I hated Ethan to the bone, hearing that he might be dead, a complicated emotion still welled up in my heart. "Miss Vance, do you think this is too merciful?" Russo misunderstood my silence. "If you are not satisfied, I have 100 ways to make him regret ever being born." No need," I shook my head. "Let it be. I don't want to become a bloodthirsty person." But I knew clearly, from this moment on, the innocent and romantic Ava Miller of the past was dead. Ethan killed her, and this strange world full of power and danger also killed her. Russo looked at me, with a hint of approval in his eyes. "Miss Vance, you are very much like Ma'am, as decisive and as merciful." Like my mother, I gave a bitter smile. If she were truly merciful, how could she have built an empire that Russo was loyal to? I waited at the estate for 2 days. During these 2 days, Russo took meticulous care of me. My food, clothing, and accommodation were all of the highest standard. He thought to use this way to make up for his previous mistake. He also revealed some things about my mother in bits and pieces. It turned out, my mother, Eleanor Vance, was not the owner of a small import-export company. Her true identity was the head of Vance Industries, a vast multinational conglomerate. The group's business spanned the globe, involving finance, technology, energy, and many other fields, many of which operated in the gray areas of the law. And Marcus Russo was the highest person in charge of the group's European operations. He said my mother had built her empire from scratch in her youth. The process was bloody and full of storms, and she had made countless enemies. Therefore, she had taken strict protective measures. For me, her only daughter, Ma'am always hoped that you could live a simple and happy life like an ordinary girl, away from disputes and dangers. Russo sighed. So she hid everything, and deliberately distanced herself from you, for fear that you would have any connection with this world. I didn't expect you to still get hurt. His words solved the mystery that had been in my heart for years. I always thought my mother didn't love me. It turned out she was protecting me in a way I didn't understand. My heart was filled with mixed feelings. There was gratitude, sorrow, and also resentment. Why didn't she tell me sooner? If I had known earlier, perhaps I wouldn't have been deceived by Ethan's facade. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, a huge roar came from the sky above the estate. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and saw a black helicopter slowly landing on the central helipad of the estate. Russo's expression turned serious. He said to me, "Miss Vance, it's Ma'am." My heart leaped into my throat. I didn't know what kind of mood to have to face this mother who was both familiar and strange, nervousness, anticipation, and a trace of indescribable fear intertwined in my heart. The helicopter's propeller slowed, whipping up a huge airflow. The grass clippings on the lawn were blown everywhere. The cabin door opened, and a figure in a black trench coat slowly walked down from the plane. She wore large sunglasses, covering half of her face. Even from a distance, that powerful aura made me feel a sense of suffocation. She didn't come alone. Behind her were 2 rows of bodyguards in black suits. Their presence was intimidating. She took off her sunglasses, and the face I had been familiar with for 22 years was revealed. Still beautiful and cold, but at this moment there was no expression on her face. Her eyes were as sharp as a knife, as if they could pierce a person's heart. This was my mother, Eleanor Vance. She was no longer the ordinary mother in my memory who would cook for me and scold me for a bad grade. She was like a queen who had descended upon the world. Every step was steady and powerful. Everyone bowed their heads to her, and Russo was no exception. She walked up to Russo and paused for a moment, giving him a cold glance. Just that one glance made Russo, who held sway in the European underworld, instantly break out in a cold sweat, and his bow became even lower. "Ma'am, Russo stammered. "Dereliction of duty." Eleanor uttered 3 words. Her voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of 1,000 pounds. Russo's body trembled, and he dared not say another word. Then her gaze turned to me. That scrutinizing and strange look made me feel like a prisoner awaiting their verdict. Follow me. She dropped those words and walked straight towards the main house. I hesitated for a moment, but still followed. We walked one after the other down the long corridor. Neither of us spoke. The atmosphere was so oppressive it was suffocating. She led me to the study, the same one where Russo had reported to me before. She sat behind the huge mahogany desk, her hands crossed on the table, quietly looking at me. Under her powerful aura, I felt as small as an ant. Sit, she pointed to the chair opposite. I sat down at once, my body tense. Russo has told me everything that happened. Her tone was calm, with no discernible emotion. You handled it well. You didn't fall apart. You have my strength. I felt a little perplexed. Was that a compliment? But I didn't know how to respond. She suddenly asked, "Do you hate me for hiding this from you for so many years?" I looked up and met her gaze, and I saw a trace of fatigue hidden in the depths of her eyes, and a complex emotion. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I need time to process all of this." She didn't seem surprised by my answer, and nodded. "From today on, you don't need to know anymore. I will arrange for you to go abroad, to a place where no one knows you. I will give you enough money to last 10 lifetimes, so you can continue to live the simple life you want." Her tone was flat, as if she were arranging a trivial matter. My heart sank. I almost blurted out, "What if I don't want to?" This sentence made a look of surprise appear on Eleanor's face for the first time. She re-examined me, as if she were seeing her daughter for the first time. "You don't want to?" Eleanor's brows furrowed slightly. A flicker of an emotion I couldn't decipher passed through her sharp eyes. "Do you know what my world means? It means you will never have a peaceful night's sleep again. It means you could be surrounded by betrayal and danger at any time. Do you think what happened this time was just an accident, Ava? You are too naive." There was a hint of mockery in her voice, as if she were laughing at my overconfidence. These words, far from making me back down, instead stirred up the stubbornness in my bones. I stood up, speaking with some agitation. "I know. It's because I was too naive that I almost died abroad. It's because I knew nothing about this world that I took a con man as my true love. He protected me too well, so well that I was like a useless flower raised in a greenhouse. I don't want to live that kind of life anymore. I don't want to be that fool who doesn't even know who her own mother is." The study fell into a dead silence. Eleanor looked at me quietly, her face expressionless, but her eyes grew deeper and deeper. I didn't know if she was shocked by my words, or if she was contemplating something. After a long time, she slowly spoke. A barely perceptible sigh in her voice. "You've grown up." My emotions instantly calmed down. I sat back down in the chair, looked at her, and quietly waited for her to continue. She sneered, her gaze contemptuous. "You think you can stay just because you want to. Countless people want what I have. You are my only daughter. And also, my only weakness. From the day your identity was exposed, it was destined that you would become a target. Your staying will only be a liability to me." The word liability stung me like a needle. I clenched my fists, my nails digging deep into my palms. My gaze was firm, and I said word by word, "I will prove I am not a liability. I will learn everything so you can see that I am not only your daughter, but can also become your asset, your strength." This was the first time I had so clearly understood what I wanted. I didn't want to passively accept arrangements anymore. I wanted to control my own destiny. Eleanor looked at me, her eyes complex and unreadable. After a long time, a faint, imperceptible smile touched the corners of her mouth. "Good. Very good." She nodded. "Since you chose this path, you have to bear the consequences. Starting tomorrow, your education begins." "Education?" I looked at her with a puzzled face. "That's right." Her eyes instantly turned sharp. "A qualified successor has to learn much more than you can imagine. Finance, law, management, Krav Maga, marksmanship, and also how to read people." Her words opened a door to a new world for me. This world was full of challenges and dangers, but it also made my blood boil with excitement. "I'm ready," I responded without hesitation. Eleanor nodded with satisfaction. She got up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. With her back to me, she looked out at the estate. She suddenly asked, "Do you think a lowlife like Ethan could get close to you so easily and trick you into going abroad?" I was taken aback, then realized. Yes, according to Russo, my mother's protection of me was very strict. How could a con man like Ethan break through the multiple layers of security unless... "There's a mole among us," I blurted out. Eleanor turned around, a look of approval in her eyes. Not entirely clueless, her tone was flat, but it sent a chill down my spine. Ethan was just a pawn. The one who really wanted you is someone hiding in the dark. Your return will just lure the snake out of its hole. As soon as her voice fell, there was a knock on the study door. A middle-aged man walked in, dressed in a proper butler's uniform, with a gentle smile on his face. I immediately stood up and shouted in surprise. James Henderson, was our family's longtime butler. He had been in our home since I could remember. He watched me grow up and treated me like his own daughter. He was the person I was closest to besides my mother. Why was he here too, Miss Ava? You've suffered. James's eyes reddened, his voice choked with emotion. I was about to go forward and comfort him, but then I saw a cold and strange smile at the corner of Eleanor's mouth. Her gaze went past me and fell on James. She spoke slowly, her voice was not loud, but it was like a bomb exploding in the study. James, tell me, how should I deal with you, a traitor who has fed from the Dance family for 20 years? As Eleanor's words fell, the air in the study seemed to freeze in an instant. I couldn't believe it and whipped my head around to look at James, the James who had watched me grow up since I was a child and always affectionately called me Little Ava. At this moment his face was deathly pale, the color quickly draining away. His body was frozen in place, his smile stiffened, and large beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Ma'am, what are you saying? I don't understand. James's voice trembled, his eyes darted around in panic, not daring to meet Eleanor's gaze. My heart sank to the bottom of the valley. His reaction had already said it all. You don't understand, Eleanor sneered, and strode towards James. Although she was shorter than him, her presence completely crushed him. Let me remind you, the security personnel around Ava were all door appointments. Every time she went on a date with Ethan, the security was pulled away by you for some reason. A few days before she went abroad, you frequently contacted an overseas number belonging to the Donovan family. Do you want me to show you the call logs and bank transfer records? Shall I put them on the screen for you? As soon as the words Donovan family were spoken, James's body trembled violently, his legs gave way, and he fell to his knees with a thud. He bowed his head to the floor repeatedly, his face a mess of tears and snot, crying out, Ma'am, I was wrong, I was coerced, please for Miss Ava's sake spare my life. I stood there in a daze, feeling the world spin as if it were collapsing. Ethan's betrayal had shown me the hypocrisy of love, and James's betrayal completely overturned the 20 years of genuine affection I had known. He was the elder I trusted the most, I had always respected him. I couldn't accept that the James who had once snuck me cookies and comforted me when my mother scolded me had turned out to be the mole who wanted me dead. My voice trembled with emotion. I stepped forward and questioned him. Why did you do this? My mother has treated you like family. James raised his face, which was covered in tears and fear, his eyes full of guilt and remorse. He cried, Miss Ava, I'm sorry I've wronged you. It was the Donovans. They took my grandson, my only grandson. They forced me to do this. I really had no choice. The Donovan family again. This name was like a poisoned thorn, stabbed fiercely into my heart. Eleanor's voice was calm, as if she were interrogating a criminal who had nothing to do with her. What did the Donovans offer you? That you would disregard 20 years of loyalty, James explained, sobbing. They said as long as I cooperated and got Miss Ava abroad, creating the illusion of a disappearance, to make you lose your composure in a business deal, they would give me a large sum of money and send my grandson to a private school in Switzerland. They promised they wouldn't really hurt her. Wouldn't really hurt? I sneered. Selling me to a place like that. Is that what you call not hurting? If it weren't for the phoenix pendant on my neck, if it weren't for the fact that Russo happened to recognize this sigil, what would have become of me? I dared not think. Eleanor coldly uttered one word, foolish. Do you think the Donovans would keep their promise after they'd used you this pawn? They would have eliminated both you and your grandson. No loose ends. James's body stiffened, a look of despair on his face. Clearly he had never considered this possibility. I looked at James, who was kneeling on the ground like a stray dog. The sympathy in my heart had disappeared. Betrayal is betraying, I sneered inwardly. No reason can be an excuse. Eleanor no longer looked at James but turned to me, her gaze firm, and asked, Ava, I'll ask you one more time, do you still want to stay? This is the world you will face. The people closest to you could stab you in the back at any time. I took a deep breath and met her gaze. My eyes incomparably resolute. This. Not only do I want to stay, I want to make the Donovan family pay the price. Hearing my answer, a gratified smile appeared at the corners of Eleanor's mouth. Good, she nodded lightly. Then she instructed the bodyguards at the door, take him away, and deal with him according to the rules. Also rescue his grandson from the Donovans unharmed. Send him away, don't let them ever appear before us again in this lifetime. The bodyguards immediately stepped forward, and dragged the limp James out. I understood my mother was using a cruel method, to teach me a lesson about betrayal and human nature. She was also telling me in her own way, that even when facing enemies, she had her own principles and bottom line. Only the two of us, mother and daughter, were left in the study. Eleanor walked to the bar cabinet and poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handing one of them to me. The Donovans have been our family's mortal enemy for decades. She took a sip, and said slowly, their patriarch Liam Donovan is ruthless and cruel, and will stop at nothing to achieve his goals. We have been fighting openly and secretly for years, with both wins and losses. I have always protected you, Wei, so he couldn't find an opportunity to strike. I never expected that after all the precautions. The enemy was inside the house. There was a hint of weariness in her tone. I could feel that James's betrayal had hit her hard. Why are they targeting me? I couldn't help but ask. Because you were once my weakness. Eleanor looked at me, her eyes complex. They thought that by controlling you, they could threaten me and gain an advantage in our business competition. Unfortunately, they miscalculated. She paused, then continued. They didn't know that forcing you out would awaken a sleeping lioness ahead of schedule. From that day on, my education officially began. My life was scheduled to the minute. Every second was precisely utilized. At 6 a.m., I began 2 hours of high-intensity, physical, and combat training. My instructor was a taciturn former Special Forces operator. His training methods were simple and brutal. Every move was a fatal blow. After the first day of training, my whole body ached, as if it were about to fall apart. I didn't even have the strength to lift my hand. But I gritted my teeth, and didn't make a sound. The morning was for 4 hours of business classes. Eleanor had hired the world's top financial analysts, lawyers, and corporate management consultants to teach me in rotation. They broke down and explained the decades-long development history of Vance Industries and countless classic business cases. A flood of information poured into my brain, making me dizzy. It was only then that I understood that the business empire my mother spoke of was so vast and complex. The afternoon was for learning skills such as marksmanship, defensive driving, and intelligence analysis. In the evening, Eleanor would personally check my learning progress for the day, and would also ask all sorts of tricky questions. She was a stricter examiner than any teacher, and no detail could escape her eyes. Days passed one by one, and I, like a sponge, frantically absorbed knowledge that I had never been exposed to. In the past 22 years, the physical fatigue and mental stress were immense, but I felt an unprecedented sense of fulfillment. I could clearly feel myself growing and transforming at a rapid pace. The once naive and weak Ava Miller was being replaced by a stronger, more resilient soul. That evening, after I finished my classes, I dragged my exhausted body back to my room. Just as I was about to rest, Russo suddenly knocked on my door. Miss Vance. His expression was solemn. There's movement from the Donovans. My heart tightened. What did they do? They seem to have found out about James's disappearance, and also guessed that you have returned safely. This afternoon we detected an unusually large-scale movement of the Donovan family's funds. At the same time, several of their security firms have also begun to frequently gather manpower. Russo handed me a file. According to intelligence analysis, they are very likely planning a major operation, and the target is very likely to be you. I took the file and quickly scanned it. It contained an analysis of the Donovans' recent movements, and several possible attack plans they might take. I stared at the cold data and text on the document, but instead of feeling any fear, I felt a strange sense of excitement. This was like a test, a final exam of what I had learned during this period. Just then, my phone rang, breaking the silence. It was an unfamiliar number. I hesitated for a moment, and pressed the answer button. A voice came from the other end of the line, once so familiar, but now it filled me with a sense of dread. Ava, it's me. It's Chloe, my best friend from college. Before I went abroad, I had even had dinner with her, telling her that I was going to Europe with Ethan. Why did she suddenly call me from an unfamiliar number? Chloe, what's wrong? You don't sound right. I keenly heard the sob and fear in her voice. Ava, help me. They took me. They said they're from the Donovan family. They said They want you to come alone, to the abandoned warehouse by the waterfront. Otherwise, they'll kill me. There was a burst of noise on the phone. And then the call was cut off. My head buzzed and went blank. The Donovans, they had actually gone after the people around me. They knew Chloe was my best friend, so they caught her to threaten me. Miss Vance, what's wrong? Russo saw my face change and quickly asked. I told him what had happened. Russo's face instantly darkened. This is a trap. Miss Vance, you must not go. They just want to lure you out. I have sent people to investigate. We will be able to find Miss Davis's whereabouts soon. There's no time, I interrupted him, my voice trembling with anger and anxiety. They asked me to go alone. If they find out there's anyone else, they will definitely hurt Chloe. Chloe was innocently dragged into this. She was one of the few people in this world who genuinely treated me as a friend. I absolutely could not let her get hurt because of me. But Miss Vance, this is too dangerous. Russo tried his best to dissuade me. I know it's a trap. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down, but I have to jump into this trap. Marcus, help me prepare immediately. I'm going to the warehouse. Also, gather all the manpower you can mobilize. As soon as I enter, immediately surround the place. Don't let a single person escape. Russo looked at me, and in my determined eyes, he seemed to see the shadow of Eleanor Vance. It was the aura of a strategist, calm in the face of danger. He no longer tried to dissuade me, and turned to carry out my orders. I changed into a black tactical suit that was easy to move in, and tied my hair up high. I looked in the mirror. The reflection of myself was so unfamiliar. Her eyes were sharp, her expression was cold, and she exuded an aura that warned people to stay away. I took a small pistol from the drawer. I had practiced with it thousands of times this past month. I skillfully checked the magazine, loaded it, and then tucked the gun into a holster at the small of my back. Donovan family, Liam Donovan, since you have taken the initiative to start a war, then be prepared to bear my wrath. The night was as black as ink. The abandoned warehouse by the waterfront was like a giant beast, lurking in the darkness, exuding an aura of danger and decay. I drove a plain black sedan alone, slowly heading towards this death trap. As requested by the Donovans, I did not bring my phone, nor did I have any communication devices on me. But what they didn't know was that there was a grain of rice-sized positioning and eavesdropping device on the button of my jacket. This was a top-of-the-line technology product from Vance Industries that would allow Russo and the others to know my movements in real time. The car stopped in front of the warehouse. Two burly men came forward and roughly dragged me out of the car and searched me. They confiscated my car keys, and after confirming that I had nothing else on me, they pushed me into the warehouse. The warehouse was empty and dilapidated, the air filled with the smell of salt water and dust. In the center of the warehouse, Chloe was tied to a chair, her mouth was sealed with tape, and there were tear stains on her face. When she saw me, she shook her head desperately, her eyes full of fear and despair. Beside her stood a middle-aged man in his 50s. He was wearing an expensive suit and was playing with a gold coin in his hand. A cold smile hung on his face. Although it was our first time meeting, I immediately guessed his identity. The head of the Donovan family, Liam Donovan. Besides him, there were also a dozen or so henchmen with weapons, surrounding the place. Eleanor Vance's daughter really has some guts. He really dared to come alone. Liam saw me, and spoke slowly, his voice hoarse and unpleasant. I ignored his sarcastic gaze and looked at Chloe and said coldly, "Let her go. This has nothing to do with her." "Let her go." Liam laughed as if he had heard a great joke. He crossed his arms, the corners of his mouth turned up, his face full of disdain. "What right do you have to negotiate with me now? You are my prisoner." With that, he waved his hand, and two big men immediately came forward and grabbed me from the left and right. I tried to use my mother's name to intimidate him, and raised my voice. "My mother will soon find out I'm missing. Then none of you will be able to escape." "Ha ha ha." Liam threw his head back and laughed, his eyes full of arrogance. "You think I'm afraid of that bitch Eleanor I caught you today, to let her taste the pain of losing her daughter? I want her to know what happens when you cross me, Liam Donovan." His eyes were venomous and crazed, his hands clenched into fists, his knuckles turning white. "It was she who ruined my family back then. Today I will make her pay in blood." It turned out there was such a deep hatred between them. A thought flashed through my mind, and I suddenly remembered a case from a business class. More than 10 years ago, during the early expansion of Vance Industries, they had used ruthless methods to crush a rising family business in a hostile takeover. The head of the company eventually went bankrupt and took his own life. Could that family be the Donovans? As I was thinking, Liam had already walked up to me. He reached out to pinch my face. "You are indeed quite a beauty, just like your mother, a viper in silk." His words were full of insult. My eyes turned cold. Just as his hand was about to touch me, I suddenly turned sideways and slammed my elbow into the ribs of the man behind me. The man grunted in pain, and the grip on his hand loosened. I seized the opportunity, ducked my body, and broke free from the other man's restraint, and smoothly drew the pistol from my back. The movements were as fluid as water, and as fast as lightning. By the time they reacted, the dark muzzle of the gun was already pressed against Liam Donovan's temple. I shouted, "Nobody move, or I'll shoot him." The surrounding thugs were stunned, not expecting this seemingly weak girl to be carrying a gun, and to be so skilled. They all raised their weapons and pointed them at me, but they were afraid of hitting their boss, and didn't dare to act rashly. Liam's face changed, clearly not expecting this turn of events. But he quickly calmed down, spread his hands, and said provocatively, "Little girl, you think you can walk out of here with just a gun? Go ahead and shoot. Even if you shoot me, you won't leave here alive." I held the gun steady, my voice firm. "I don't know if I'll live or not, but I know that before I die, you will definitely be going down with me." The training I had undergone had made my mental fortitude incredibly strong. We were in a stalemate. The atmosphere was extremely tense. Liam gritted his teeth and asked, "What do you want?" I said coldly. "It's simple. Have them release my friend, prepare a car for us, and let us leave safely. Once we're clear, I'll let you go." Liam roared, "In your dreams." At that moment, the sound of multiple car engines and screeching brakes came from outside the warehouse. Immediately after, the warehouse's doors and windows were illuminated by tactical flashlights. Russo's voice came through a megaphone ringing out over the area. "Listen up, everyone inside. You are surrounded. Drop your weapons immediately and release the hostage. This is your only warning." Liam's face instantly turned ashen. He knew he had been tricked. You actually called for backup." Liam looked at me in disbelief, his eyes wide with anger, almost spitting fire. He probably never dreamed that I would be capable of orchestrating this. I looked at him coldly, a mocking smile playing on my lips. "The people outside are my mother's people." "Liam, did you think you were the only one who could set a trap?" Liam's face turned from green to white. He knew he was completely finished today. His carefully planned kidnapping, which was intended to break Eleanor Vance's psychological defense, had instead become the battle that made a name for me. Outside the warehouse, Russo's men began their assault. The sound of flashbangs and ramming doors was incessant. Liam's men were in disarray, their morale collapsing. They were just a disorganized mob to begin with, and they were no match for the well-equipped and well-trained security forces of Vance Industries. I pressed the gun to Liam's head and said word by word, "Liam, you have already lost. Tell your men to release my friend, otherwise we all die together today." I glared at him, pressing the gun against Liam's temple, my finger tight on the trigger, my breathing growing heavier, my knuckles turning white. Under the threat of death, the madness in Liam's eyes gradually faded, replaced by a trace of fear. No matter how ruthless he was still a person who was afraid of death. Let her go." He managed to squeeze out a few words from between his teeth, his voice trembling slightly. His men didn't dare to delay and immediately went forward and untied the ropes on Chloe and tore the tape from her mouth. "Ava." As soon as Chloe was free, she ran towards me crying. Her steps were staggering, her body still trembling. I protected her with one hand, my other hand still holding the gun tightly against Liam's head. "Don't be afraid, I'll get you out," I comforted her softly, my voice calm and firm. Just then, with a loud bang, the warehouse's main gate was rammed open by an armored truck. Russo led a team of fully armed men and rushed in. Seeing the scene inside the warehouse, everyone was stunned. They probably didn't expect that I would have single-handedly taken control of the entire situation. After a brief moment of shock, Russo immediately reacted. "Secure the scene." At his command, his men moved quickly and subdued Liam's men one by one. Liam watched as his men were taken down, a look of complete despair on his face. He knew the Donovan family was finished. I held Liam at gunpoint, and with Chloe I walked out step by step. Every step was incredibly steady. The city lights shone on me again, but I felt like I had just walked through hell and been reborn. Rousseau walked up to me, his eyes filled with admiration and relief. "Miss Vance, are you all right?" he asked with concern. I shook my head and handed him the gun. "Take care of it." I looked at Liam, who was being held down by the security team, and said coldly, "For those who betray me, I can give them a quick end. But for those who harm the people I care about, I will never be merciful." Hearing my words, Liam struggled frantically, cursing venomously. "Ava, you venomous bitch, you'll get what's coming to you, I'll see you in hell." He stared with wide eyes, his face twisted. I didn't spare him another glance, and directly took the shaken Chloe into Rousseau's car. The car drove away from this abandoned warehouse, and also drove away from that part of my past that I couldn't bear to remember. On the way back, Chloe held my hand tightly, her body still trembling slightly. I could feel her fear, and I comforted her softly. "Chloe, don't be afraid. It's all over now." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with unfamiliarity and confusion. "Ava, who are you? Why do you have a gun? Who are those people?" I looked at her, and knew I could no longer hide it from her. "Chloe, I'm sorry. There are many things I didn't tell you." I took a deep breath, and briefly told her about my family background, and everything that had happened recently. After she heard everything, she didn't speak for a long time, just looking at me with an extremely complicated expression. I knew. Our worlds had become different from this moment on. We might never be able to go back to the way we were. When we returned to the estate, Eleanor was already waiting at the door. When she saw me return safely, a rare expression of relief appeared on her perpetually icy face. Although it was fleeting, I still caught it. "Well done." She walked up to me and patted my shoulder. Much better than I expected. This was the first time she had praised me so directly. My nose tingled, and my eyes felt a little hot. The grievances, pressure, and fear of this period seemed to have found a release at this moment, but I held back. I didn't want to show any weakness in front of her again. "I told you I wouldn't be a liability." I looked at her and said solemnly. She looked at me, a gratified light shining in her eyes. The two of us, mother and daughter, after experiencing this life and death ordeal, the barrier between our hearts seemed to be slowly melting away. The downfall of the Donovan family was even swifter than I had anticipated. The day after I returned from the warehouse, Vance Industries launched an all-out devastating attack on all of the Donovan family's overt and covert businesses. In the financial market, the Donovan stocks plummeted as soon as the market opened, and countless retail investors and institutions frantically sold off their shares. In business, all of the Donovan family's partners announced the termination of their cooperation overnight, and their businesses that operated in the gray areas were uprooted by a mysterious force. In just 3 short days, the once dominant Donovan family declared bankruptcy and completely withdrew from the stage of history. And Liam Donovan, along with his core subordinates, also disappeared from this world forever. This was the power of Eleanor Vance Thunderous, and leaving no loose ends. After this storm, my life also underwent a tremendous change. Eleanor no longer treated me as a greenhouse flower that needed protection, but began to truly cultivate me as her successor. She started taking me to high-level board meetings, and let me participate in core project decisions. "Look here," she taught me personally, her finger lightly touching a data report. "When analyzing financials, you must grasp the key performance indicators," she said, circling the key points with a pen. When facing cunning business magnates, she patiently taught me, "During negotiations, your gaze must be firm, and your tone must be calm." She demonstrated with a sharp gaze, and a voice that was neither servile nor overbearing. "Balancing the interests of all parties is like walking a tightrope. You must have perfect control." Her expression was serious, her hands making a balancing motion. I was like refined iron thrown into a furnace, forged by her 1,000 times, becoming increasingly tough and sharp. I was no longer the love-struck fool deceived by a man's sweet words, nor was I the weak girl who panicked in the face of danger. I learned to think calmly and solve problems decisively. My gaze also became more and more like hers, calm and sharp, exuding a power that brooked no challenge. My relationship with Chloe had a subtle change. After the kidnapping, her eyes held both gratitude and awe when she looked at me. An insurmountable distance had grown between us. Eleanor gave her a large sum of money and said, "Go abroad, start a new life." Chloe's eyes reddened, and she nodded silently. I understood that this was the best protection for her, and also the best ending for our friendship. We might not be able to talk about everything like we used to, but I will cherish this friendship. A year later, at the dance industry's annual shareholders meeting, Eleanor stood on the stage, her gaze sweeping across the audience, and solemnly announced, "I declare Ava Vance will be the sole heir to the corporation, and will serve as executive vice president from this day forward." I walked onto the podium. Thousands of pairs of eyes in the audience were fixed on me, but I felt no trace of nervousness. I looked at my mother in the front row. She was looking at me with a proud and gratified gaze. We smiled at each other. No words were needed. I picked up the microphone. My voice was steady and powerful. "I will guard this empire with my mother. From this moment on, I will fight alongside my mother to protect the empire she built. My story has just begun. That man named Ethan has been forgotten in a corner of my memory. He was just a stepping stone on my path to becoming stronger." The phoenix pendant on my neck was warm against my skin. It was not just a relic from my grandmother. It witnessed my rebirth, and reminded me of the responsibility I shouldered, and the queen's path I had to walk.